Alright everybody, welcome back. It is Lazy Shen. And if you're an HSR player and don't really follow the Hoyo Play forum stuff, you probably missed this drop from last night, but it is the developer radio for the 3.0 Amphorius patch. Basically, it's the way for devs to address feedback and concerns from players and how they're going to make adjustments and improvements in the future. Specifically this time, it is for the story, it is for puzzles, and it is for exploration. And it's really cool to see like the devs actually doing this stuff more often as well, because it shows that they're listening to feedback over and over again and, like, you know, dedicated to improving the game rather than just like letting it go and cashing the money and, you know, running away with it basically. But first and foremost, the story issue. What is the story issue? There's a lot of lore dumping in this episode. In this chapter, there is a big new world that has a complex design, and there's a lot of lore dumping, a lot of history and culture to learn. But if you just do that without really anything cool happening, if it's just exposition, then it can feel a little bit tiring. And so in the upcoming versions, you'll be able to skip this content if you don't like it. And I think that's just like the way it is. Not every player is a lore player. I'm a lore player, but I feel like if you're not, it could feel a little bit tired to read all the story, specifically in regards to the history of this world, right? Obviously, it's cool to listen about Titans and Chrysosaurs and miracles and stuff like that, and the story about the 12 people who are rising up, right, in this crisis, basically. But Finon does have this problem a lot as well, where he locks you into like an unskippable dialogue. And so in the future, a lot of exposition that is not necessary for the story right now will be skippable. And I think that's a really good choice, because otherwise it is a little tedious. And there's other examples as well where they force you to do like a lot of dialogue options. You have to try like all 3 options before you can move on. And that is just like adds fluff to a story that doesn't need it, which is basically not something that really is nice for players. It is very bogging for players. A lot of my friends did say that this was like their least favorite patch overall, specifically with that issue in mind, right? And so it's nice to see that they're slimming down on all that stuff. But moving on to the puzzles as well, a lot of puzzle optimization will be in this thing. Basically, I think a lot of the problems with the puzzles, there's a lot of different kinds of puzzles. Same with Penacony as well, there was a lot of different kinds of puzzles. But in this case, some puzzles had like a lot of steps, and so it could feel like it was interrupting the story if the puzzle took too long. There's a few examples here as well with taking too many pieces in order to unlock the next part, and so they're going to be slimming down the puzzles in the future. I think puzzles is like a kind of like a staple for HSR, so I don't want them to remove puzzles entirely, but I think it's cool that they're willing to accept that the puzzles may not have hit the mark with enjoyability. A lot of the Penacony puzzles were optional, and when they weren't optional, they were pretty fast to get through, and it was cool, right? But I think in this zone as well, there's a lot of tedious puzzles, like fetch puzzles and like that were not really, they weren't hard enough to be fun, and also not really fast enough to be like, oh, okay, you know, I'll just do it and move on, right? And so it's nice to see them addressing that as well. But additionally, for exploration as well, they're moving a lot of the combat zones. So a lot of the areas just have like random guys that just exist and they just like pop out and attack you. Now they will be empty halls that no longer have like a billion dudes on the side waiting to jump you. Now they'll be just empty spaces if it doesn't really call for it. If there is an area that makes sense to have a lot of combat, I don't think they're gonna cut it, but if it doesn't make sense, like randomly in a hallway, like does it make sense that there's like 70 dudes just waiting there in a hallway for you for like no reason? Not really, right? And so I think it's nice that they're addressing this. And so basically, they're going to be fine-tuning the process over the course of the next few patches, and hopefully they'll be dropping these effects in version 3.2, which is nice. Very soon. I believe that is the patch that Casters comes out as well. That's really cool to see these changes come out during that time. But yeah, man, I mean, overall, it's super cool and nice to see. And there is one more big change as well, which I'm very excited to show you guys. It is this one right here, which is the new change, a big statement at the very end saying that they're dedicated to optimizing content and add richer combat and gameplay as well as the end goal. And obviously, one of the big issues and one of the big, feedbacks of players is that it's hard for them to deploy older characters. I'm looking at characters like Jing Yuan. I'm looking at characters, from the beginning of the game that basically have no love. They come out every once in a while as like a pocket pick. But it's really hard to use these older characters in comparison to the new ones, right? And I would agree, and you would agree with that as well. And so they're dedicated to making and strengthening older characters, not just making like a new version or anything like that, but actually buffing older characters in some ways to make the content possible with these older characters. So if you like these older characters, right, from like Luofu Part 1, if you like these older characters from like Bella Bach, still gonna be usable today. We might see, stuff from like Zile lovers, for Jing Yuan lovers, for any lovers of the previous areas. Hopefully that is soon. I think that's really, really cool as well because, there's people out there, myself included, right, who have like one husband and one waifu. And so it's hard to see the story move on and like basically never being able to use it again if you want to challenge like late game content such as like MOC or stuff like that. And it's nice to see that they're going to buff them. Perhaps some of these older characters are going to be like staples in MOC and stuff like that. Just like how Himiko like randomly came back to become like a forerunner in some of these older endgame content. I'd like to see this as well for other characters. But yeah, that's going to be the whole patch. Hope you guys enjoyed. Tell me your thoughts. I'll see you guys next time. Peace. Late.